Welcome to the OC. I'm Phil, and this is my co-host Corey. And tonight we are talking about one of the most bizarro cases that we've probably covered, MKUltra.
Oh, it's up there with the Montauk Project as far as bizarre, except
it's real.
It's real. Yeah,
it's real. And it's tip of the iceberg. So what you're going to hear tonight is based on some files that weren't destroyed. Right, basically. So yeah, let's get into this bad boy, because I'm not even sure. It's such a big topic that
do a summary, Phil. Summarize for somebody, if you're going to stick around for the full thing. I mean, we got MKUltra, which should be enough to keep you
MKUltra. So you're looking at the government's way of using mind control to basically get information from a target, or to make someone do something that they want them to do. That pretty much is the mind control was the premise of most of this.
Focus.
Well, that's the how. But I mean, what MKUltra was to be more effective at extracting information from a subject, and then of course being able to tell if convert. That was one of the big things, was to convert agents. Say a Russian agent, convert them against their will to become like a sleeper cell type agent. I had no idea. And I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, for guys that have a conspiracy type podcast, I had no idea about the depth of MKUltra. Really? I knew about it. I'd watch movies, right? Like The Manchurian Candidate,
or American Ultra with Franco, right?
I didn't see that one. I didn't see that. So
remember it being,
but there's a bunch of them, right? Like the Jason Bourne type, yep. Where they're made faster. This was all born of, no pun intended, born of MKUltra, like the ideas anyway. But let's start at where the root that we're aware of this began. So you've got right now, we'll set the scene. It's the Korean War, right? This is kind of where I'm seeing everything kind of taking place. Early 50s.
It can go earlier depending.
It can.
And this is the thing. Like if you look at some of the stuff they talk about, the experiments that ran in the Dachau.
Well, so this is the correlation,
camp.
Right?
Yep.
Like well, go ahead. You were saying, but
yep.
the correlation between Operation Paperclip, right?
Yep.
It all stems from there. And if you haven't seen that, like and subscribe. But it's basically hijacking a bunch of Nazi fucks and using what they've done in Dachau, like you said, or other concentration camps where they did horrible fucking things to people, and the CIA went, "Hey, we'll take those guys."
Well, like you said, the Korean War provided an excellent.
Yeah,
it was a big issue. Yeah. They managed to get a lot of support for, hey, we need to be able to do advanced interrogation. Mm-hmm. We need to be able. So let's go to your Korean War, Phil.
And even worse, they thought those fuckers are doing it, right? So they really thought that North Korea and China, the Chinese and the Soviets, because they were all players in the Korean War. They were like, those fuckers have mind control shit going on. We want mind control shit going on.
And it's funny when you talk about that. Really, between China and North Korea, they had trouble feeding people. Russia, on the other hand, was the big superpower player, right?
Well,
so it had a lot of,
sure.
And it didn't dissuade anybody from thinking it had this super awesome mind control stuff.
No, in fact, you would have soldiers, if they ever lived, to tell about it. But I mean, advanced torture techniques. We want to know your secrets, right? You're like, I'm just the guy who drives the bus. Fuck. 200 days later of tortures, like, God damn it, man. All right. So basically, at the time, there was the director was Alan Dulles, and he was the CIA director.
Alan Dulles. They named
D-U
International. The Dulles International Airport is named after this bozo.
Is it Dulles? Wouldn't it be two S's?
Okay, I don't know. I just know it's Dulles Airport.
Oh, okay, so this is
after him.
As you said, bozo says, all right, well, let's approve this project, which is based off, like you had said earlier, there's different projects. I don't think we should get into those right now.
We don't need to get in them, but we can talk about that. It started as Project Bluebird and Project Artichoke, this is the evolution of those initial ones.
Yeah, and this is where things go fucking off the rails, right? So now we have to remember that these are what? These are clandestine projects. This is highest level of top secret that the president himself wouldn't fucking know what's going on, I would assume. Or would he?
Or would he? I love the use of that, or would he, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, this is the thing. So one of the challenges the CIA posed for most administrations is they really did their own goddamn thing and said, you know what?
Yeah.
Don't ask how the sausage is made. That sausage, my friends, is freedom. And you don't want to know how it's made.
That's right. We call this plausible deniability.
That's right. That's right. Do yourself a favor. Yeah. Don't ask questions, and I won't have to lie to you.
So exactly. So the scope was so broad that there was actually 150 different like human, like projects and experiments that they were trying to do. They were trying to accomplish. So it wasn't just one in particular. And a lot of times it was involving psychedelic drugs. So we'll get into that deeper later. Paralytics and electric shock therapy, which we know all of these are quite effective at changing behavior.
I mean, ECT, for example, is used in the case of, now it turns out it was used wrongly in the initial psychiatric field. It was originally used in a form of torture. Yeah. Not that it was intended as such, but it turns out if you are depressed, hitting you get a proper ECT actually fixes that.
These were 30 to 40 times more powerful than those standard shocks. So, and done over days, not over seconds.
This is the Edison Tesla thing about barbecuing elephants, right? It's like, hey, guess what? If we go up and crank this up to 11,
right. let's see how far it'll go, Jerry. Wait, his eye sockets are fucking melting. Oh, right. Maybe we should stop.
I think we're going to get information out of them now.
Yeah. So, so many things led to, so they were conducted. From what I read, there was like 88 fucking universities. So these are being done, not just, there's no like secret, well, there are secret little CIA labs, of course. And they're positioned in places all over that the US has bases or territory that is US controlled, right? So some of them are in the Philippines. Some of them are in Germany at this time. Some of them are in, occupied places. But it's not just fucking America. Canada, God damn you, Canada. I'm so ashamed. You get involved too. And we'll go into that later, but fuck. It's all over the place. It's pretty crazy.
Well, remember, the US was the big boy in the yard. So if
they started
just asked you to do something like, hey, you know what, we'd like to do something.
Yeah.
What kills me is you had this being done. Now we know about some of the cases, like here in Canada, we know about Canada, and we know about some of the stuff they did, shenanigans in the US. What the hell if that's what they did, what's coming up?
Well, listen,
it's interesting stuff. What do you think they did in the Philippines? What do you think they did in Germany?
So listen to this though, Canada. We fucking not only, when they got caught, when they got their pee-pee slapped by the commissions, guess who paid our dudes to continue on? Yeah, that's right. Canada paid the same fucking guys to continue on their research. Anyway, we'll get into that. It's craziness. This is mind-boggling, some of this shit. So anyway,
almost too much stuff, right, Phil? Like seriously.
And that's what I said. I said, this is how many, I mean, I think we may one day touch back on this or something, but if anything, if this opens your eyes just to do a little bit of reading, right? To see if you are from America, if you're from Canada, whatever country you're from, I would suspect that almost any country with any kind of intelligence background has done something like this. Like this is to, like in those 150 human experiments, it was like how to torture, how to become more effective at torturing. They wanted to break the brain down to its basic elements. Does that sound about right? And then rebuild it.
Exactly. And it depends on the level of what they've done, right? So again, we're getting ahead of ourselves with the Montreal stuff, but they talked about the depatterning, right?
Yes.
So this is real, like this is sci-fi kind of stuff that
It is fucking Orwellian. It is
Exactly.
George Orwell through and through, and it was happening.
1984, happening in 1950.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So instead, so they didn't have the resources available to actually do these. Like, well, first they didn't have the fucking people, right? So who do you use for people that if you needed to, you know, get some easy test subjects? Who would you use, Corey?
You know what? There's some good ones. You use people that they won't miss. You know, you go off, use things like
criminals, prisons,
hippies,
mental hospitals.
Mental hospitals, people who are in situations that either you don't care. And funny enough, one of the I was doing some reading on this, and they were talking about, they were linking the MKUltra stuff back to some of the shenanigans that happened with Charles Manson.
Well, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, he was apparently, the guy who shot Robert Kennedy, little Bobby Kennedy. Like the
guy who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest apparently volunteered. So a lot of most of the volunteered.
That's right.
They might not have had the concept of informed consent. For those who don't know, informed consent means you actually know what you're agreeing to versus, hey, you like to party, right?
Hey, you like drugs, don't you?
Here you go. Have some drugs.
I'm going to give you some really crazy shit for about 14 days. And we're going to see how long you can go without sleep.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. And that, you know what? There's a 20 spot in it for you at the end of the day. Okay. Say goodbye to your parents. Good night now. Yeah. And that's exactly what it was like. I mean, so those were the places, right? So for my, you know, this is the disheartening thing. It was basically people that could not protect. I mean, they were weak. Right, they targeted the weak, and they knew that. They knew drug addicts, for instance, and there was instances where they would say to heroin addicts, "Hey, look, if you do some of this shit on LSD, when you're done, we'll give you a bunch of heroin." And the heroin addict goes, "Wait, I'm going to be high, and you'll give me more heroin? Okay, well, let's sign me up."
That's right. The paragons of bad life choices at this point.
Oh, yeah.
And you're basically putting in front of them more bad life choices. But hey.
Yeah. Well, the main drug that I read about was LSD.
I heard LSD 25 is what I...
25. Now, I'm not sure what that means in terms of designation of... Maybe it was a controlled version. Maybe there's different levels.
It could be a, like you said, a actual distilled version of it.
Maybe, I don't know, instead of something that's more street. But that tended to be, so they used other things too. Like psilocybin was another one. Any kind of
psilocybin, that's mushrooms, folks, magic mushroom stuff in case you're not street enough.
Yeah, well, and psilocybin is actually, there's synthetic psilocybin now too, I believe, which they call it the God
company
drug.
That did that, by the way. I invested in a company that's supposed to, it's new me. Well, it's new me, and it was supposed to take off because they were going to be using this to cure PTSD.
Yeah.
It did not take off. My stock is worth about half as much right now. So I'm waiting.
Give it time, because you know what? A lot of research is out there on psilocybin, and apparently for depression and things like that, it's amazing. Microdosing psilocybin. This isn't go out and lick a toad, folks. Eat a bunch of mushrooms.
What they were doing here, folks. Dude. This was not microdosing.
So, you know what this is? This is a fucking prime example of people just taking advantage of other people. It's just, you know, they're not even human anymore. So if we go back to Operation Paperclip, they're doing the same damn thing the Nazis did. There's no difference other than, you know, they're not doing it in a concentration camp. They're doing it at a university under controlled whatever. But I think, what do you think? I mean, it's just one of those fucking things where this burns my ass.
Remember, Phil, when we were this last weekend, when we were up on Lake Nipissing there, and, you know, it was like the perfect storm because we had 3-foot high waves, and we came to the conclusion that humans are terrible people. Right.
I had that far before that, but yes.
This is the continuation of that. Exactly. Yeah. You're right. We're not Thank God we weren't experimenting on the Jews for a change, because they could deserve a break.
Give them a break.
War II, right?
Yeah.
But the 50s was rife with all this stuff. There were tons of I think the Milgard experiment, the obedience to authority, was within this. I want to say it was 50s. Like, this was before there wasn't ethics in medical ethics.
Well, you know, it's funny because my wife said the same thing because she has a master's of social work. So she's like, oh yeah, because I said, well, she asked what we were doing, and I told her, and she says, well, oh yeah, McGill University. She goes, yeah. So what came of that was an ethical body that was now any kind of experimentation, any kind of whatever. There has to be an independent ethical body that, you know, it created that you can't as easily do these kind of things, right? So I'm not sure what that name is, but anyway, there should and as there should be, right?
So funny you mention about that. So one thing to talk about, since we sort of touched on the ethics thing, all of this eventually resulted in 2 executive orders. Did you read the two executive orders?
No. Well, maybe. I don't know. I read a lot.
So Ford released Executive Order 11905, and essentially, they had to put a clause in it. It was mostly about don't go around assassinating people, CIA.
That's a good one.
Have a specific clause in it. This shows what terrible people. When you have to actually say,
"Hey, don't assassinate people."
Well, no, but here's the clause that they put in this one: don't assassinate people. Oh, and by the way, foreign intelligence agencies shall not engage in experimentation with drugs on human subjects except with informed consent, in writing, and witnessed by a disinterested third party of each human subject, and in accordance with the guidelines issued by the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects for Biomedical and Behavioral Research.
Right.
You had to create an order that says, okay, folks, apparently,
wait a minute,
you don't know not to do this. And then Reagan did another one.
Really?
He did one. Yeah, Reagan did. So that was Ford. So Reagan did another one, Order 12333, which was human experimentation. No agency. And again, you notice the pattern. No agency within the intelligence community shall sponsor, contract for, or conduct research on human subjects except in accordance with guidelines issued by the Department of Health and Human Services. The subject's informed consent shall be documented as required by those guidelines.
Yeah. So a little to touch on that, this happened in 1945 in the Nuremberg rules, right? So they're in direct violation of World War II's Nuremberg. Is it a Nuremberg statutes? I can't remember
I'm not sure the exact term, but
it was an agreement. And we don't experiment on other human beings because it's wrong.
Because it's
whether
wrong.
You trick them into doing it. So this is the other thing about all of this. It wasn't just those kinds of people that were being, tested upon. It was their own CIA employees, military employees, doctors, nurses, you name it. They were being drugged and done horrible things to against their will. It's all documented. So,
yeah, it's when you talk about, so in some cases, for example, the CIA, this is where the informed consent gets kind of hazy, right? So some of the employees thought they were signing up basically
right.
signed up for super soldier, like Captain America. I'm going to become Captain America.
Yeah.
No, you might think you're Captain America.
I'm the best of the best of the best, sir.
Exactly right.
Wait, you're gonna put what in my ass? You signed the paper. I mean,
signed the paper. You should have read closer. We don't have those orders yet saying we can't do this, so we are doing it, right? Yeah. So they signed up for stuff. Now, some did sign up saying, "Oh, sweet," like you said, and some patriots were like, "Sweet, I will do this, and I will see if I have, tough enough to avoid falling for this." But yeah,
but a lot of the tests were mundane, right? Like,
sure,
like when we get into, some of what happened, but if you're drugged and put into a coma. Like some of these people were put into comas for like the longest, I believe, was 173 days.
This was you're talking more about the Montreal stuff, right?
That was in Montreal.
So that was the worst. That was really the worst out of all of it. It was surprisingly the worst that we know of. I'm sure they had something over in the Philippines.
And this is the problem is that we only know a fraction of what actually happened because they destroyed. Under the guidance of who was it? Which you must
Richard Helms.
Richard Helms. He's like, so in 1973, this Richard Helms guy goes, Watergate just happened. We're all fucked. Burn those files. Burn them all. But can you tell us about the bureaucracy that takes place?
People who go off and complain about governments. sometimes bureaucratic incompetence helps, and it actually saved something like 20,000 cases of this. So if it saved 20,000 cases, I believe it was 20,000 boxes of the documents.
20,000. Was it 20,000 files or was it 20
records? I think. Yeah, I don't think it was 20,000 boxes, but it was 20,000 records were misfiled by clearly a clerk who I would love to say thought that should be
didn't
preserved,
give a
but probably
fuck.
was
Good on her or him.
That's right. Fucking, I don't know. Yeah, whatever. Put it under other.
Well, it ended up being found in a financials records place. So it was actually filed under finances for whatever reason. And without that, we wouldn't even be talking today, right?
Because we wouldn't have anything, right? So eventually, and we'll touch on it in a bit later when this all sort of comes to light, right?
Yeah.
Without those files that were found, it was all just witness testimony.
That's right. That's correct.
Right.
And did you know who broke this fucking case? It was the New York Times.
Yeah, and he was apparently, they were going to charge him with sedition.
Yeah, they were like, we're going to put you in jail for a long time.
What was his name? Do you have his name?
I don't have his name. I looked. I couldn't find it.
I had found it. Where did I find it?
I'll find it and put it up if I can find it. But I I don't know.
Oh, here we go. New York Times. That was a New York Times, but where the hell?
Yeah, it was 1973. So Watergate's going on.
So everything's hot.
They're burning everything. They're like, we're getting rid of shit. This is Vietnam shit. We should get rid of it. We got to toss these records, and it was a big shakedown, right? So, but yeah, so that, in a nutshell, is kind of where they went. Like their idea is to basically learn how to control the mind, and they wanted to see the limits of the mind too, right? And they did this through extreme cold, extreme heat, other sources.
Just to interrupt briefly, Seymour Hersh was the New York Times columnist, New York Times reporter that broke this. Seymour Hersh.
Seymour Hersh. Very good, Seymour. Good job. Seymour. Good job, Seymour. You really did a good one for your country. Yeah. But so where can we go from here? So we have I'd really like the Nazis. We already talked about them. So
a lot of this had its origins there, right? So these techniques, intense interrogation and the use of drugs really isn't new. No, it's not new. No, but it can be taken to a different level. And what they did was something that was really unheard of, is they started to do this on their own people that they were perhaps concerned about being double agents. Right. There was a lot of paranoia. So at one time during the height of the Cold War, well, I guess the start of the Cold War,
I think
post-Korean conflict, they were super worried about the idea that you would have all these double agents or spies within the organization. And they weren't wrong, because if you look at a lot of the history, there were a lot of double agents. I don't think this caught any of them, but
no, I don't think so either. But the thing is that they use these techniques to better, I read some of the stuff about, how they wanted to be able to break down a mind, to its basic, almost to a childlike state. And then to, in that state, to be able to rebuild it to, whatever suited them. So like a Manchurian candidate type idea, you have no recollection of what happened. You're basically put back together. And when we need you, this phrase or this thing will release, our true intent for you.
Very much the sleeper concept, right?
The sleeper stuff.
That you aren't even aware that you are able to do that. It's all of a sudden you're triggered, and now you're a killing machine.
Yeah. So a lot of people speculate too that this is not really, MKUltra is not a CIA as much as it is just a continuation of the Nazi camps, right? But these are run by similar doctors. I couldn't get any names because everything's redacted in these files, right? So
I've seen some of them.
The files are there. They're
but they're hilariously redacted. It's like, this is essentially a black page. What am I looking at?
So the government, even though it's released these files, it's very heavily redacted. It's like, subject redacted, injured, blah, 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 redacted. Yep. So it doesn't exactly tell you exactly what happened other than, so there, I don't know. That to me is not really telling the whole truth, but yeah. So
what would you say is, okay, I'm sure we're going to talk about the exact same thing, but if I said, what is the most disturbing yet somewhat stimulating thing this project they did during MKUltra?
There's some weird shit, but probably the brothels. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I can't remember.
What'd they call it?
Appropriately named.
What was it?
Operation Midnight Climax.
Is that what it was called?
That's what it was. That's what it was called. Like the guy, which was a George Hunter White. It's just, this is the guy who did it. It's like, I don't know. Like he was like, okay, it's a brothel. It's gonna.
Yeah, they actually made these. Like, I mean, so they would have like they could view. So that was the other part of the drugs, right? Is that okay? Take your LSD, but then we want to see you fuck a hooker. Like what? What?
Well, okay.
And observe.
Except when they didn't tell people, so they set up these.
Yeah, they didn't know.
They set up these brothels. Yeah, sent them up for business. They set them LSDs up. Yeah, and they'd slip them LSDs, and then they would do. One of the heard the term was what? Post-coital conversations in an effort to try and get them to reveal stuff. And of course, this devolved into sexual blackmail, right? Like
into coitus, as we call it.
Coitus. Coitus, whatever. Cortisol,
sex.
I don't know.
It's sex, Corey.
After sex. Pillow talk, folks. It's pillow talk. Okay.
See what kind of weird shit he comes out with.
Pillow talk. So basically, they would dose people. They would go off and engage in relations with these prostitutes who were working for the CIA, and they had an expense account. Like there was this.
Oh, a huge. So at the time, the only records I could see about their expenses for MKUltra was around $10 million in the 50s, which works out to some ridiculous amount of money now. Like it would be like 80 some million dollars just for what they could see. It would be insane. It's probably way larger than that. Yeah. So
it was insane. And this was a case of where they had set this up. This was not like they were sending foreign dignitaries there. So it wasn't that kind of thing. At least, I guess, when Russia does it, they do it for, foreign dignitaries to try and get them some stuff. These were like US citizens, and they were just testing. They're like, let's see what happens. We'll dose them on this and see. They'll have the best sex of their life, and maybe they'll tell us stuff. And
your next door neighbor. It doesn't. Yeah, there's no rhyme or reason to it. So I've got some points for scale of the project.
Yep. So
we can read through them and talk about them if you want. This is kind of some of the things that they were interested in. It's not all of them. It's just a few. So substances which would promote illogical thinking and impulsivity to the point where the recipient would be discredited in public. So they would use things like this, like, you mean get him drunk and he takes a piss in the streets?
And a $5 phrase to say that. Get them to do dumb shit. Basically, be a frat boy. Yeah.
So it says substances which increase the efficiency of mentation and perception. So they were doing tests for with hypnosis and stuff too. So it goes all over like it's not just the drugs. It's a combination of, breaking down the brain, brainwashing these individuals, but also finding out what we can use to, like they want to discredit. Well, why would they do that? Well, if you pose a problem and you look like a fucking idiot in front of, the media, you're less likely to people to believe you. Right.
Well, one of the other things in that mentation thing is, like you said, it wasn't just about, hey, how can we screw with people? Some of the stuff, the mentation thing and perception was, how can we enhance? This is total super shoulder stuff. This is like, hey, how can
Jason Bourne
field agent? Jason, how can we make him better? Yeah. How can we take our field agents and make it so that they're more aware, they're able to think better, clear, see solutions to problems, and
they did that. They had success in that. Yeah, they had success, right? With certain things, certain drugs, certain therapies that they tried, and it could increase their mental capabilities of memory, for instance, or problem solving or what have you. This goes back to, like some of these psychotics. I mean, the things they must fucking know, because this didn't just die. There's no way. This had to be. This was repackaged and put into some other name, and it's what have you. Whatever it is. But so materials which will prevent or counteract the intoxicating effect of alcohol, which is good. But to do that, you have to get someone stupid drunk.
Sounds like a sign me up for that test. Okay.
Yeah. So they would use alcohol. It was one of the things that they would use. Or, so what else was there? Materials which will produce the signs and symptoms of recognized diseases in a reversible way, so that they may be used for malingering, etc. So you think you got cancer, or you radiation poisoning, or something to that effect. So these are weird. Like this is a lot deeper than just the brain, right?
And there were a lot of and again, this shows, like you said, the scope. This wasn't just them focusing on how do we make Manchurian candidates. It's like no, they're human, a bunch of stuff.
Well, there was 150 subcategories underneath MKUltra, and of those each of those could have had subcategories, right? So I didn't really want to get into too much of that because it just seems to go on forever. But these are some of the main things that they wanted to try and do. So materials which will render the induction of hypnosis easier, or otherwise enhance its usefulness. So we do know that there are drugs like sodium pentothal and things like that, truth serums and what have you. So I'm assuming that there must be a drug. We assume that
more suggestible, right? Something that puts you in a state.
Well, look, when you're on Stalin, what he used to do with all his generals, he'd get them fucking hammered. So don't get drunk around Stalin. Because and then you tell us how you really feel. Hey, George. You don't like how I run things, George? Oh, yeah. See you later. You're in the fucking gulag for the rest of your days.
You had a choice to kiss me or Trotsky. Who would you pick?
Who'd you pick?
Yeah, now he's German.
I was very German. Yeah, I was not Stalin.
Yeah.
So it says here, substances which will enhance the ability of individuals to withstand privation, torture, and coercion during interrogation. So-called brainwashing. So
this is back to the
super soldier.
Aspect, right?
That's right.
So you can sit there, you can take the punishment every day. You're good.
Yeah. And that's, how would you do that? Well, I'm sure they figured out creative ways, but they wanted to make super spies, right? This Jason Bourne thing isn't like to my knowledge, that sounds like pretty much everything that, we should call this the Jason Bourne episode. God damn it.
Well, it's what they were trying, right?
It was
a bunch of the stuff they were attempting to do. I don't think they necessarily succeeded to the level or did they?
Or did they? We don't fucking know. That was like 60 years ago.
Yeah, and
think about that for a minute.
Dick Helms burned all the files, so all the good stuff's been toasted. Do you think somebody misfiled the Jason Bourne file? No. He's probably had that on his desk saying, and
my guess
in the burner
is there's a handful of files that really made a fucking difference, right? Of all the shit they did, there's probably a handful of files you can put in a briefcase that are like the gold, right? And some douchebag is sitting there with the chain to their body, and they have those files
one of the funny things, conspiracy wise, is they talked about the files they found. No, that's a false flag. Those files were found so that, look at the crazy stuff we were doing. This is bad. The stuff we were doing was worse. But look here, you found
way
this.
worse. Way worse. You're talking Nazis, right?
Yeah.
We watched the Paperclip episode. I'm telling you, the fucking Nazis were used to it. They're not going to go and go, by the way, nobody's going to die today. No, it's okay. No, they're going to fucking kill people doing this process because that's what they were used to. And America's like, sure, yeah, go ahead. What do you need? What can I get you?
What can we do? I tell you what, we won't ask questions. We just say, just give me a number. I'm not going to ask what you're going to do with it. Just give me.
So materials and physical methods which will produce amnesia. This was a real big one for events preceding and during their use. So I read a lot about this. This was the other, where you could have somebody who, plausible deniability, right? they end up, say they're a spy, and they could actually be, have amnesia after, like a drug, induce an amnesia. Whether or not they found out how to do that, who knows? But I thought that was pretty cool. Anytime, jump in here.
Okay, so here, this is the one thing I like. I like the $5 word they used here. Substances which will lower the ambition and general working efficiency of men when administered in undetectable amounts. So basically,
maybe they did that to me.
Well, I was going to say, clearly they have not seen, and I apologize in advance, millennials. Clearly, they have not seen our current crop of millennials. Obviously, that's what they.
I think it's the fluoride, to be honest with you.
It's the fluoride. It's the fluoride. It's the polio vaccine.
Well, what? The polio vaccine. I know all these people don't get your COVID shot, but oh yeah, you've had diphtheria, polio. Yeah, anyway, I know. But yeah, I mean, who knows? What do I know?
It's funny to talk about that.
Yeah,
I'm sure. And now I haven't found any cases of where they dosed people under the auspices of, hey, come get your vaccine. So they may have done they may have dosed people without their knowledge completely, or misled them into, hey, without informing, hey, you want a party, sort of stuff. But I didn't read anything saying, hey, they went off and shot somebody up full of LSD and said, there, now you're good for polio. So
no, not that I read of, but I mean, who knows? Who knows?
They could have.
Yeah. So
they could have.
And a lot of what they did was against people's wills, so it wasn't just voluntary. So physical methods of producing shock and confusion over extended periods of time and capable of surreptitious. I can't even say that word. Surreptitious. It's a very big word. Use. So whatever that means, I'll have to put a definition. Yeah. So making them, I guess, shocked and confused and whatever.
Yeah. I like the one where they talk about the which alters the personality structure in such a way that the tendency to being dependent upon another person is enhanced.
Oh, yeah. So weird. Like, anyway, there's a bunch more. I mean, some of the ones that are like, substances will produce pure euphoria with no subsequent letdown.
That's pretty freaking awesome. I think if they figured that out, that would be marketed.
Apparently it's heroin. I don't know. Let's ride the dragon's tail, shall we, Corey?
I think there might be some heroin addicts who disagree with you about the subsequent letdown.
Perhaps, yeah. Substances which alter personality structure in such a way the tendency of the recipient to become dependent upon another person is enhanced. Oh, that's what you just read, that one.
That was my personal
so
favorite.
Weird.
That idea of going off and saying, well, clearly it's the idea to have you dependent on somebody to give you orders, to direct. So you basically become their extension.
Their slave.
Basically, you're drone. You're a drone at that point.
Yeah. A material which can cause mental confusion of such a type, the individual under its influence will find it difficult to maintain a fabrication under questioning. So obviously,
sounds like me last weekend when we were drinking.
Yo, I got lots out of you last weekend, folks. Substances which lower the ambition and general working efficiency of. Oh, you said that.
Yeah. Okay. So FYI, I picked ones I found interesting versus just points list. So
because I think they're all
you may find
fucked up. Yeah, I figured.
They're all. Somebody sat down and thought this up. Like that's the part that like you could see a bureaucrat or an analyst.
Yeah, these are direct though from, and so they're direct from the paperwork of what some of their initiatives were, and but of course they only have 17 of them, but there were far more. So a knockout pill that'll administered in food and drink and blah blah blah. And so it all goes down to it's just anything and everything that's fucking bad for you that can change you as a human being, basically, into a drone. It wasn't
just mind control. It was not just mind control. You could see it spread over a bunch of things.
Yeah. So the biggest targets, though, were definitely mental patients and prisoners.
Well, do you want to hop over to Montreal then, since we're talking about
a
captive audience?
Yeah, I mean, Canada, we often, we always, everybody puts Canada in the nice guy category. And I'm Canadian. We're Canadian. We love our country, but it's got its fucking problems, right? Some of them are, it's just we're quieter about it. Well, these things. I didn't know this.
Pointed out in previous episode about the indigenous, the residential system, which is a really shitty part of our history.
Absolutely.
Turns out it's not an isolated shitty part of our history. No. We've done a bunch of terrible things.
We've done a bunch of horrible fucking things to our indigenous populations. It's all over the news right now. I mean, it's one of those things where Canada's actually, but it's quiet because Canadians are so nice. Well, apparently, yeah. While we're committing
the quiet ones.
While we're committing genocide, we're awfully quiet about it. I mean, it's horrible.
Well, I mean, but you look at this. This is another example of, oh, well, they couldn't have done it. No, we've done shitty things other than the indigenous.
Well, even if you look at, people say like, oh yeah, you're in a democracy, but look at the G20 when the G20 happened. How many people were detained for no reason?
Kettling. It's called kettling. They would go off and block them in, and they would keep them trapped.
Yeah.
Essentially, they couldn't leave. They couldn't get out.
Yeah. No, you're trapped. You're detained. Well, they also detained people with no reason. They did.
They took their ID tags off when they did that. So they were smart. They were.
You tell me something. What other countries do that? Oh yeah, dictatorships, right? You're not in a free.
Turns out every country does that. Guess what? When things get rough.
I'm just saying. Yeah, exactly. So we're nice, but we're bad boys too, I guess. Fuck.
Well, how about you dive into the Montreal, go into some details in it? Because this is the one that there's been numerous exposés on it, and ultimately the Canadian government wound up paying out on it.
They ended up settling out of court because they didn't want to go to court. And I think that, let me just, because it's kind of at the back of my paperwork. So let me.
Oh, gotcha.
But that's okay. That's okay. So experiments in Canada. So I'm going to put him up here. This asshole. Wait, he'll be more like over here.
Dr. Donald
Ewan Cameron. Yeah. So 1967. So basically this guy was already he was British. He was living in the States, and he was doing experiments on Alzheimer's. He wanted to or schizophrenia, sorry. He wanted to try and find a cure for schizophrenia. That was his area of expertise, right? And I'm dry. Hold on a moment.
I need some water too.
Yeah. So the CIA found some of his shit interesting.
Specifically the depatterning. So this is the one where I had seen that they had originally drawn their attention because he was doing his depatterning, which is
he was trying to.
Talking about. He was trying to, he was figuring, hey.
Yeah, his idea was if we can break down the brain into, sections, that we could remove, say, the schizophrenic side of an individual, right? But in doing so, we could basically, erase certain parts of the brain while keeping other parts intact. So the CIA was like, this is juicy. We like this. We want to know, where we can take certain things from a brain. So what you see in Men in Black? It's like and Flash, and that's essentially what he was trying to do, was to remove pieces and pick and choose. Yes. Which I think is fucking fantastic. I could think of a few things I'd love to forget. He also was calling it psychic driving. That was the name that he used to describe it, right? Oh. Is that he would go in and it was like a roadmap. That's kind of how he described it. This was paid for by the CIA. It was done at McGill.
How much he was making?
So, I thought about that. Yeah. So, tell me, because I think it was like 70 grand or something.
Okay. So it was 70 grand, which, do you know what that works out to according to for inflation nowadays?
No, I don't.
Like $500,000 friggin' dollars. Like, it's insane.
But he was there though from 57 to 64. Yeah. So, he was a doctor.
Okay. Yeah.
But he was there once a week. Like he was overseeing this project.
Yeah. So, let's keep that in mind, folks. This guy, aside from being a bit of a douchebag with, human lives, he wasn't the one always going off and sticking the electrodes in or doing.
I think in most cases he wasn't at all, but the CIA had other plans, and there were other people working at McGill University that were not of Canadian descent. So, and then some that were. Now, with this said, the Canadian government was aware of this going on. This is not anything that, this was a joint effort, so to speak. And in fact, so anyway, we'll get into the juicy parts in a minute, but what it was he was using, students, but he was also using mental patients and outreach programs to do these experiments on. And they did some fucking wild stuff. Like this is where we talked about the coma, putting people in a coma for like 170 some days. Who the fuck knows if you're going to wake up after that much time? Like that's insane.
When you talk about the coma stuff, it's fascinating because they would do a mix of it. So they put them in a coma, and I think they said the longest.
They would play music, though. They would
loops
of, and then what they wanted to see was how much of that loop would stick. Would they come out, completely like how to fly a fucking airplane? I mean, who knows?
Apparently, a bunch of people came out. They've specifically mentioned some of the side effects was urinary incontinence.
It was a good one.
The whole exercise, which is.
I think I got that too. It's a little weird.
Yeah, that's right. You're an MKUltra. You're an MKUltra.
He was one of the guys that loved to do the shock therapy, and it was at 30 to 40 times the rate, and just unbelievable.
Which is insane. I mean, you see people. So I want to say I read something about anybody who's seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh yeah, where they the stick in his mouth and
right, and they talk
so you don't bite your tongue off.
Exactly right, but that's horrible. But that's not 30 times. Like it was more than it ought to have been, but 30 times.
I'm sure you couldn't even scream. Like your muscles would just be, I did a stint as a electrical apprentice in my younger days, and I've had some really good shocks, but I'm sure that it's nothing in comparison.
Remember Mr. Thyme's electrical class?
How could I forget?
We were wiring up the stations, and you were busy chatting with somebody, and I asked Mr. Thyme,
coat hanger.
No. The coat hanger was that. No, this wasn't the coat hanger. This was the one where we were sitting there wiring up the new stations on the desk. And I asked Mr. Thyme, hey, is the power off? And he said, yes. I said, are you sure? He said, yes. I said, so if I touch this wire here, and you were holding the other wire, not paying it. You were talking. So I touched this wire here.
Yeah, I remember. And he said, do you think you're faster than the speed of light? Do you remember him saying that?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that because it just blew up. Oh. Awesome. He almost killed me. Jesus Christ. Anyway, so he loved this shock therapy business, which he may have killed people using it. I'm sure. We this is the other thing. We don't have any information on casualties. There's only one, I believe.
Oh yes, you're talking
the American.
Olsen. You're talking Olsen, right?
I'm talking Olsen.
Even that is just that's a maybe
tip of the iceberg. Tip of the iceberg. Yeah. So anyway, they would use LSD. Same idea. 30 to 40 times he loved that number. The amounts of LSD that a normal human being should take before their brain starts to shut down. And now you got to think too, these are people with mental problems already.
Yes.
And that, what are they going to be when they are done?
Turns out not cured. So FYI, folks, none of them got cured by this.
Yeah, none of them got cured, but how much worse were they? So a lot of these people came in with anxiety, postpartum depression. So a lot of women. Yeah. And then this was done to them. It's just fucking mind-boggling.
Some actually forgot how to talk.
Well, yeah. What was it? It was forgetting how to talk, forgetting their parents, thinking their interrogators were their parents. So that was the other thing they would do. They would do all these horrible things and then interrogate them, right? And see how far they could, push them. So anyway,
it's the right word, interrogators. This was not.
They were interrogators, professional interrogators.
This was not a case of, a doctor sat down and asked you.
No.
It's like, no, it was
CIA.
If they had waterboarded them, they'd be.
So they did do waterboarding as well. They did all sorts of torture. So to break down a brain, they found out that you have to torture people to break down their brain, right? You have to sexually abuse oftentimes. So there was male and female sexually abused.
Now, I don't think any of that happened in this.
Not in the Canadians, but MKUltra itself.
MKUltra touched on all sorts of horrible stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Completely. This guy, though, I don't know what exactly happened. And neither does anybody else, because none of this was ever released to the public. This was released through, I believe, the church. What was his name? Churchill?
The church, you're talking the church committee?
The church committee. Yeah, the church. Whatever he was.
Frank Church. The church committee, an investigation to the practices of the U.S. intelligence agency. So he was the one that sort of after the article came out, he was the one in charge of the committee that was responsible for investigating this. And so, that's where all this stuff started to come out.
And here's the fucking dick move on Canada's part, Canada, is that after all this stopped, in the States pulled the plug. Canada continued to fund this asshole to continue his research. We don't know how long. Now, I don't think it was to the same. Well,
I don't think it was to the same level, but it wasn't it wasn't a different research. It's like maybe not do what you did for the CIA, but keep doing what you're doing.
Well, we'll pretend that it's nice, but I don't think so. So there was 127 patients in Canada that received $100,000, right? As basically a settle out of court amount
with a gag order. So
with a gag order, you can't talk about this, or you can't
talk about. You can't talk about your experiences in that.
Yeah,
here's the money. It's like basically, you know what happened to Bill Cosby, where he went off and paid a bunch of people and said you can't tell anything. Yeah. The Canadian government did that to these people.
Yeah, and we don't know anything on this side. If it wasn't for that church committee, we'd know nothing, right? Canada's good at that shit. We're good at hiding stuff. Not that I'm not trying to shit on us guys.
Good.
But some days go Canada. Some days it's like the new shit I figure out. I'm like, what?
But we like to think it doesn't stink. No, it does. Guess what? All countries, I don't care.
I know. I agree.
Dig deep enough, they're engaged in stuff and they're doing it maybe for the best of reasons. We're doing it to protect our liberty and freedom. But it turns out you gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet, and
so they say.
The hell is paved with good intentions. So
yeah, well, this is it. So, funny thing about Cameron, this Dr. Cameron guy, he was also a member of the Nuremberg Medical Tribunal.
Oh, holy
right!
Christ.
So he's the guy that was part of. So he worked hand in hand with fucking Nazis after this, because all of the CIA shit's run by Nazis. So he would have had to work with the same people that he would have condemned. Makes sense to me.
Just insane.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
It's insane.
And this is where the knowledge, the paperclip, it's a paperclip episode, like and subscribe.
Operation Paperclip
goes into this idea that we don't believe we should get rid of. This knowledge was technically gained at a human cost. So should we get rid of it?
A horrible human cost.
Horrible human cost. Well,
yeah. I know. But if we don't do it, the other guy's going to do it. That's the reasoning behind it, right? Oh, well, China, Korea, all these places, Russia, they're all doing this research. We need to be at the top of this game, so that's their reasoning. I just don't.
It may have influenced some of the defensive aspects of it, right? Because they did talk about, as you said previously, hey, resist torture, right? The super spy thing, right? You make sure you can remember stuff and not give away our secrets.
Right.
Okay. Right. So fair enough.
Yeah, I agree. So now off American soil, not in Canada, but off American soil. Let's get off of Canada here. There's a beating up Canada.
That's the only.
Canada's had enough.
The Montreal experiments, as far as we know, was the only case of where it was done. I haven't found anything else.
McGill University. I looked too. I checked.
Allen Memorial is the Allen Memorial Psychiatric Clinic. at McGill
With the
University.
clinic, but it was McGill University. Yep. That's right.
It was at university. Yeah, it was at. It's like the Ottawa, like a clinic run at the university.
At the university, correct.
So Allen Memorial Clinic, Psychiatric Clinic at McGill University.
Right. So now
I'd like all I found that's the only stuff. So we did shenanigans, but we didn't necessarily go off, and it wasn't spread across the country at every other university as well. Not like the States
that we know of. So let's talk about the secret detention camps, because they're like one of my favorites. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
So we think things were shitty here. So now let's go to the Philippines and Germany. Yeah. And what else? Japan. So America has occupied in these areas, right? Obviously. So they have secret detention camps. Now they're not on American soil. Now they can do whatever the fuck they want with whomever they want.
So especially that worked out with Gitmo, right? Gitmo, hey, they're not war criminals. They're not criminals. So.
And we're not on Americans. Well, they're on American soil, but they're not in America. So yeah, a lot of horrible fucking things happen at Guantanamo Bay, but we're not doing Guantanamo Bay. We're doing the Ultra. So these centers, they could avoid criminal prosecution in these places because they weren't, they have diplomatic immunity. Whatever goes on in their area is technically, nobody's fucking business.
Yep.
But so they capture people suspected of being criminals, enemy agents, people that are deemed expendable, prostitutes, undesirables, basically anybody they fucking want. And then they practice torturing them, giving them psychoactive drugs, testing a lot of the shit that they've learned through other processes at home. This is ground zero. This is Dachu in terms of camps, right? If you have an area where you can, sky's the limit, people are limitless in terms of, grabbing people from a village or wherever the fuck you want. Children, women, doesn't matter. They can do all of these things. They would practice their interrogation techniques using these drugs. They would do everything from extreme temperatures to isolation. Let's see what a mind does after it's been isolated for like 50, 60 days in the dark. What happens to it? These are all the same questions that the Nazis did. What happens when we bind a woman's legs while she's trying to give birth? Sick, twisted shit like that, What do you think?
So this is, when you think about the shenanigans they got up to on American soil,
right?
Take that and multiply that by a factor of 100, and that's the crazy stuff they were doing off American soil. So, I mean, it boggles the mind when you just the stuff. Now, again, the records aren't great, but
no, they're not.
As we've seen, strongly suggest the stuff they did.
Yeah. So think about that for a minute. Like when you hear about the Vietnam guys, right? Like, let's go back to the Yuba County, like and subscribe. And Gary Mathias is, fucking cousin or whoever it was.
I think you're thinking Night Stalker.
Oh, the Night Stalker. Sorry, my bad.
His cousin, the stuff he did, because
Yuba's in my mind because it's doing
I don't think Gary served
so popular. Richard Ramirez, really sorry, his cousin in Vietnam, cutting the heads off of Viet Cong, raping women, taking pictures, immorality of tenfold of what anything we could do.
Cutting the heads off and raping them in an order that may surprise you.
Yeah, he didn't give a fuck. This is the kind of crazy, because why? Because he's on a foreign soil. He's he can. So what does that tell you what these fucking guys are doing?
Hey, we're doing Americans on American soil. So
yeah,
and they're over there. Hey, guess what? Any veneer we had of, we should be careful because we don't. Oh, wait, don't worry, we're good.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. There's going to be just absolute chaos, and they wanted to destroy these people's minds, and they used the tools they found, and that could be included with like becoming a super soldier, or not a super soldier, but I mean a super spy, like a Jason Bourne type idea. But yeah, so in 1973, apparently this was all shut down. Unless
apparently.
You
want. So the funny part about it is MKUltra itself. So just for I guess, correctness, MKUltra in 1964 became MK Search, which FYI was still pretty much MKUltra.
Right. Yeah, there was a bunch of them, right? There was MK Search, there was MK, and I didn't want to get into too much of that because I found it confusing. So I can only imagine. I mean,
well, so fun fact: did you read about how they came up with the name MKUltra?
No.
Yeah, so it's fascinating when you look at it because the MK comes from what was it? Indicating the sponsorship of the technical services staff. So apparently, the MK was associated with the technical services staff, and Ultra was security clearance. With the designation of the most secret classification of World War II intelligence. So MK Ultra.
Gotcha.
Guess what? Don't tell people about the really terrible things we're doing to American citizens.
Yeah. Well, anyone for that matter. I mean, citizens of all nations, of all creeds and colors. Yeah. So, but it's apparently shut down. I don't believe that myself. I mean, I have no proof, but I mean, it would make no sense to me that you would put all this time and effort and then just say, okay, we're done. You know, it doesn't make any sense.
If you found nothing, I could get it saying like, I want to, in a future episode, I want to talk about Project Stargate, right? The remote viewing one where they said, you know what? We didn't find anything. Let's shut her down.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case,
it's too broad. This too big
stuff.
Of course they found stuff. And the thing is that, you know, why would you tell anyone if you did find stuff, right? It just becomes another, you know, national security level thing. And yeah, anyway, so they shut it down. What was it, 77? Was it 77 that the New York Times came out and said, okay.
So the church committee was formed in 1974. So I'm assuming that
it was right. Yeah, okay.
That it would have been 1974, New York Times journalist Seymour Hersh published a story, and then they start the committee.
Yeah, and from there, nobody talks. Nobody talks. What does that tell you? Right? Nobody wants to come forward except for those that have been experimented on. And even those people don't want to talk. Right? So it was one of those very difficult things where, you know, the people that came forward in Canada got reimbursed. I believe the US citizens were reimbursed as well. I can't remember. Do you remember reading anything about that?
I didn't read anything. The only reimbursement I heard was there were some prostitutes that got paid in Midnight Climax. So that's the only thing I read about reimbursement. So
Midnight Climax.
Midnight Climax, the name of my action flick. Midnight.
Well, the problem was there was no, because everything was destroyed. So they had no proof that, right, that they could come back on these individuals. So in Canada, there was record of
look at our Falcon Lake incident one, right? We talked about that where heavily documented. This was, I suspect, heavily documented, although none of the documents have ever been actually released, have they?
No, not in Canada, and nor will they ever be released. Maybe in 100 years from now.
You know. I think the classification is, it depends on so if it's top secret, I believe it's 50 years, I want to say. Depends on what they classified it as. And whether it even falls under the classification, and whether, do you really think the Allen Memorial Clinic kept great records?
National embarrassment. How long is that? How many years is that, Corey?
National embarrassment.
you know, we did fucked up things to people against their will. Jeez. Yeah. Anyway, what do you want to add? Because I mean, I mean, if we could get into the ins and outs of everything. But.
So this is the problem with this. This is a massive spider of a thing, right? You could go down all the other like Project Often. You could touch on all the things Project, you know, Castigate, Chatter. You could start going to all the different things.
Tons of them.
Tons of them. And we would be spending the next 3 episodes talking about it. So I think we've said what we said. MKUltra was a thing, and if you ever have any doubt about the shitty behaviors governments get up to on their own people, you just got to look at this.
You know what I found funny though? Not funny, but Canada didn't even recognize it till 1984. Did you read about that? The Fifth Estate was basically the one who went, "Oh, hey, you know, do you guys know about this?" And then it's never talked about again. Like,
Yeah.
Weird. I thought that was interesting.
Adrian Clarkson, I believe, covered it, right?
I think so. Yeah. And I'd like to actually watch that. I'd like to try and find that on maybe on the YouTube.
My notes should have a link.
You got a link?
Yeah.
Go check out the website, folks, orderchaos.ca. Yeah. And yeah, because I'd like to see that, because it'd be quite interesting to see the take on it in 1984 and how much of that was hushed up. But, you know, it just, I don't know. It never ceases to amaze me how cruel we can be to one another.
Yeah.
You know, and do we want to mention some notable people that were part of the, we kind of touched on them, right?
We touched on them, but I think it's worth touching on them again.
Yeah. So Ted Kaczynski was one of the biggest ones, the Unabomber. So
don't know what a great fellow he was.
Yeah, well, so as a sophomore at Harvard, Kaczynski participated in a study described by author Aidan Chase as a purposely brutalized psychological experiment led by Harvard psychologist Henry Murray. In total, Kaczynski spent more than 200 hours as part of the study. That's fucked up.
It's totally fucked up.
And he was a genius, right? Like I watched a documentary on this guy, and he was an absolute fucking genius. The other fellow was apparently, this is going by his lawyer, Saran, who was not related to Duran Duran, if anyone's wondering. He was the convicted murderer of Bobby Kennedy, or Robert Kennedy. And they believed that, and that was part of their case, was that he was operating under MKUltra's influences.
That he was actually
he was under my control,
and that this was intended. This was not a random wackadoo. This was this was him doing exactly what they wanted. One of the original aims of MKUltra was to get people to do stuff they want them to do.
Yeah, and the other one was what was his name? He was the Whitey Bulger.
Oh, Whitey Bulger. James Joseph Whitey Bulger, the notorious Boston mobster. Apparently he participated.
He said, well, no, he didn't participate. He was in prison, and they held him against his fucking will. And he said that they tortured him. You know, so there's a bunch of other ones, but those were the ones that I
probably feel less bad about that happening to Whitey, but
yeah, you know, I but still, you know, if you're there to serve your time, and I do, you know, there are certain exceptions to every rule, of course. We have talked about that, but you know, if you are someone who is going to be released, there's no way you're rehabilitating if you're being tortured while you're in prison. I mean, you might as well just put a bullet on them. I mean, seriously.
Now, you've just highlighted, by the way, the problem with our prison systems is that what is the purpose of it? Is it revenge, deterrence, protection of society, rehabilitation? Because you can't do all of those.
It's none of those. And as a person who's worked in the system, it's just housing. It's just time. It's
theoretically, that's protection of society, right? While you're in jail,
it is a protection of society.
But it doesn't work with any of the others. It's not. Yeah.
No, but they make, you know, the prison system makes it as a rehabilitation. It's not. You know, can inmates get an education? Can inmates perhaps join groups and change their lives? Sure, but I mean, really, one, there's not enough funding for everybody to do it. You know, there's just and
it's a huge outrage whenever you hear about Johnny, Mr. Terrible Guy, getting his master's in.
Well, for sure. Well, I'm unlikely to be getting a master's in anything, but you're you know, it can happen, I'm sure. But the big thing is people get upset that, you know, well, what do you want? You know, he's going to jail for 10 years, right? For a crime he committed. He's going to do his time. Why not have him educated, and instead of coming out and going back to crime, have him educated enough or skilled enough that he can actually find work? And
people want him in a bottomless chair, like that James Bond movie with the ball, seemed really involved for torturing James Bond. But
right, but that's the problem, is that society. Here's the thing: is that, you know, we all want peacefulness. We all want everything to be perfect and what have you. It's just not reality, right? And people make mistakes. You have good people that do make mistakes, I hate to say it, but it's true. Serial killers, I believe, should just be put in the ground. That's just me. That's just an opinion. It's not personal. Child molesters and serial killers, they all can kind of,
But murderers are okay.
I'm on the fence.
Problem, right?
I know.
I'm on the fence.
If I was like, oh, he dies, he's alive, he dies. I mean, no. Do I? You know what? The system is flawed. Every system is flawed, and I don't have any answers. I can be the
could have fixed this, Phil. If we hadn't stopped them, maybe they would have found a way to fix all this. Saying, okay, the killer, like it was Clockwork.
Lobotomize everybody.
Lobotomies, Jesus,
that's a real thing.
Yeah, because that fixes problems.
Yeah, let's drill a hole in your brain, and then guess what? You don't think anymore. You're just fucking, Anyway, as far as this goes, MKUltra, your thoughts? Final thoughts?
Perfect example of the shitty behaviors governments engage in, and to accept no substitute, folks. This is something that is real and documented.
It's very real.
You just see when Dick Helms decide to go off and torch all the files to minimize their exposure. What the hell? Like, talk about adding.
That's the head of the CIA.
Yes, the head.
Says, burn them.
Get
them, all of them.
Yeah,
get rid of
all
them.
the files, and I'm going to stand by the incinerator. We're going to drop them in. Unfortunate. And again, it comes back to, in a lot of cases, the stuff they engaged on premise is the informed consent. And it's why it's vitally important when anytime you run experiments that people actually know what they're signing up for. Don't get me started on the stuff they engaged out of country. Well, even in country though, there was a lot of lot. It was, I would say, you're probably looking at anyone who really knows what they're getting into would have said no. Torture? Yeah. What? Wait.
You're gonna what? You're gonna what? Get me high and then what? Beat me? What?
To see how resistant I am.
Can we just get me high?
Can we just skip the beating part? And
can we skip the beating? Fuck. Can we? Yeah. I'm gonna get a bag of heroin out of this, right?
I'm still getting the heroin, right?
Anyway, yeah. Do you want to summarize because you're really good at that?
Okay, so the MKUltra program was an American program designed to create either, depending on what you read, super spies or Manchurian candidates. It was an awful lot of uninformed consent or outright coercion / torture of people to test these theories. And it all the documents mysteriously burned in a fire that wasn't so mysterious. Apparently shut down in the late 1970s. So yeah.
Canada continued on though for a bit.
Yeah, but we didn't continue on under MKUltra. I'm sure we had a Canadian version of it.
Wish I knew our super name for our super spies program. It would be like Crazy Canuck or
Captain Canuck.
Captain Canuck.
Call it Alpha Flight.
Nice. That's original.
Yeah.
So what are we doing next week, Corey?
Okay, so one of me wanted to go off and deal with the other.
One of you?
Okay, one of me. One of my thoughts was
one of me. Jesus.
One of me. That's right. MKUltra, Phil.
I know.
The schizophrenia. The experiments the US did on their own people regarding sexually transmitted diseases and what the untreated effects, despite the fact that we clearly knew what happened when you did not treat some of these sexually transmitted diseases over time. It turns out it gets really bad. Yeah, brain damage.
Napoleon. Bonaparte.
But I decided against that. Let's go with another. We're going to go with, it's called the Stargate Project.
Oh, all right.
Remote view. This is remote viewing, folks. This is back. We're going to go back to psychic since we talked about MKUltra, which is psycho. Let's go to psychic.
Psycho to psychics. I like it.
Maybe we will see a return to Yuba County eventually if there's enough information. We can justify another episode because that's one of our most popular episodes. Which
but you know what? It's an interesting story, and there could be little side bits and
sure
about the whole county, not just the boys, the whole county. That would be interesting. So we'll look into that. So
Stargate Project next time.
Stargate. All right. Thank you very much for listening to the OC. I'm Phil. This is Corey, and we will see you next week for the Stargate Project. I can't wait. Love the TV show. MacGyver,
No, not the same thing.
All right. Good night, folks.
Take care, folks.